Welcome my friends, Seven Gray here. Thank you for joining me for this episode. Today I am working on the cargo trailer, so you'll get to see what the inside of a cargo trailer from Renown Cargo Trailer and Rock Solid, the inside looks like after the plywood is removed. Let's roll the intro and get into it. This video is sponsored by Renown Cargo Trailers. A week ago today, my truck was stolen, and I'll link the episode above where that was stolen. Since that time, I have become very paranoid and cautious about theft of vehicles, and I've been crazy concerned about my cargo trailer. So I've upgraded the locks on it. I'm working on finding a good GPS tracking system. Welcome your thoughts on that if you have any suggestions or experiences with GPS tracking units. And I guess some of them the plan's included, some of them you have to do a monthly subscription, some of them are battery powered only, some of them rely on battery power in the vehicle to power it. So anyway, it's very confusing to me. I'm looking into that. As you can see, the trailer behind me is pretty much empty. I only have the refrigerator, the mattress, and the spare tire back here. That's about it. And I've started removing the plywood off the walls. Let me show you what it looks like here. My walls are 8.5 feet tall from top to bottom here. So they put the sheets of plywood sideways, as you can see here. So that would be 4 foot there, 4 foot there. But they have a 6-inch gap, which they have filled with this piece here. And then they had some decorative trim all the way around the sheets of plywood. I've already removed most of the trim that went around the edge of the plywood sheets, which you can see over here. So this is the trim. You can see it's actually very, very thin. In fact, many times these pieces were just breaking out and shattering as I would take them off. And then they used some caulk to seal up any of the gaps. So all of the gaps were sealed, and it was pretty much airtight, meaning no bugs would come in to the cargo trailer. And you can see some of the trim still up here. That piece broke there, but you can see how it's along all of the edges, and then covering any of these gaps like this were all covered by these strips here that you see over there. Here's some good examples of how nicely the trim was done around the edges. You can see it around the wheel wells. I removed this piece already, but it was really nicely done like this with caulk along the edges. There are a few things that are unique about my cargo trailer that are not standard with the standard package or most cargo trailers that you would purchase. So let me point out a few of those upgrades that I've done, and some potential problems that I've just recently realized because of my upgrades. So let me explain that. Okay, one of the upgrades is I did this extra bracing that went along on an angle to help it be more secure. Now that was recommended because my trailer is taller than normal, that I have this 8.5 foot ceiling top to bottom. Another upgrade I did was I put these posts, the metal posts here, 1 foot apart. Typically those are 18 inches, so they would be about this far apart from here to here. Now this gives me a lot more structural strength with these being 1 foot apart, but there's a potential complication that I didn't realize when I ordered it that I've recently come to the realization, and I don't know whether the trade-off of having a stronger frame here is worth the complications that I'm going to have in my build because of this because of the 1 foot centers here that I have. So let me explain a couple of things that I see as potential problems. Maybe you have some better solutions on how to handle these, and maybe it's not an issue for the concerns that I think I've got going on. One of the complications is my ceiling joists up here, these metal pieces, the tubular steel up here, are 1 foot apart. That's great for support in the roof, and the ceiling makes it much, much stronger. But one of my plans was to add some ceiling fans up there, and I wanted to be able to get my solar up and then figure out where to put the ceiling fans. Ceiling fans are typically a 14-inch square that you cut in the roof to drop in, and they design them that way because Every RV and camper out there is built on 18-inch framing, so you can go easily in between that 18-inch gap with a 14-inch ceiling fan. Well, I now have 12 inches between, and probably about 10, a little bit over 10 inches of space in between. They don't make ceiling fans, as far as I know, that are 10 inches by 10 inches. So the only way I'm going to get a max air fan up there like I had before is to cut one of these beams and then create some sort of structure around it. I would actually have to weld in some tubular steel structure around it to frame it. Maybe that's not a big deal. I'm just learning to weld. I'm interested in welding, but that is an extra layer, an extra thing of effort that I have to go to with my build here to put in a couple of ceiling fans in this rig. So that's one issue. Similar issue is with the floor, the subframe. Let me show you that. The underside of the Renown Cargo trailer from Rock Solid also has 12-inch center for the beams, and the beams are huge. They're really, really hefty. This makes it fantastic for the inside for being stable. I have very little flexing going on inside of the trailer. It's very, very firm, and this is really great, but there is a downside to that as well. Let me show you. Here's the underside. You can see these very large beams. These are 1-foot centers, and so the distance in here is only about 10 inches. The complication with that is if I want to put tanks underneath, for instance black water tanks, gray water tanks, even freshwater tanks, I only have a space about 10 inches wide and then going side to side. That's a very narrow, small tank to fit in there. Most of the tanks that are designed for RVs are again fitting into that space between the joists. For instance, my brother in Las Vegas has a Weekend Warrior, and I think it's 24 inches between his beams underneath, and this is a toy hauler, and he has these very large tanks that are like 20 plus inches wide and probably 10 inches, 8-10 inches deep top to bottom, and then they go the width. So these are like 100-gallon plus tanks for his gray water, his black water, and his fresh water. So very large tanks all underneath. That's going to be very difficult for me to do unless I cut up these beams to make larger space or manage to find custom tanks that will fit into that space at a reasonable cost. So these are some of the complications of doing 12-inch on center like I have here. Before removing these, I actually went through and labeled all of the pieces of plywood. So this is section 10, this is the middle piece, this is the bottom piece, and up there is the top piece. So I have 10T, 10M, and 10B, and all of these are labeled similar ways so that I'm able to find which pieces go where if I want to put them back in the original order. And they're all in the top corners, so that makes it easy for orientation. One of the surprising things was how thin this plywood is. So this is 3/8 inch ply, and here's the measurements here. It's 9 by 2440, 1220 millimeters. So that's the actual dimensions on this particular piece of plywood. They're very, very, very thin and brittle. I have to be very careful as I remove these not to break them. So I guess I would have preferred having something slightly thicker, maybe 1/2 inch ply on the walls. I know that would add extra weight, but I think that rigidity and a little bit better for the quality of the wood on the sides. But other than that, I'm very impressed with the overall strength, the steel structure. The construction here is pretty good so far. Here's one other concern I have not mentioned, which is I have some gaps around the edges that I didn't expect. As I mentioned before, all the plywood on the inside was sealed with caulk, so bugs can't get in. But I'm a little concerned about the weather getting in from the outside because of all of these gaps. Let me show you some of the gaps. So down here you can see in the floor there's significant gaps between the aluminum siding and the bottom there. There's a pretty big gap all the way down along this side, and I've not even removed all of the walls. Here's another gap down here on this floor. You can see there. And then there's gaps around the corners. There's more gaps over here. There's holes here. There's more gaps here. So I'm finding gaps all over the place. I've actually found gaps on the outside as well as I started looking where the seams meet here on the side. So this seam meets this seam, and then there's bowing and gaps, and I can see gaps along the edges here. So I'm very concerned about that. I'm going to be adding, I guess, some sort of caulk or silicone there to try to seal up all of these little gaps. The other night I went inside and I could see light coming from the outside to the inside as I closed everything up, and I found over 70 gaps in the paneling on the side. So that's going to be a lot of extra work on my side to go in and seal up all of that so that the moisture from the outside and the insulation will be much better as a living space. Now, to be fair to Renown Cargo Trailer and Rock Solid, these are intended to be used as cargo vehicles for ATVs, lawn equipment, moving things. So for that purpose, this construction is more than sufficient. Really, really great. For a living space, probably needs to be taken just a little bit further on sealing these things up and getting rid of all of these little gaps for bugs coming in, like from the outside, insects, roaches in Florida, mosquitoes, other kinds of insects getting to the inside, as well as for insulation for colder winters or hotter summers. So I want to seal it up for that purpose. Again, cargo trailers are what they're selling, and for cargo use, these are absolutely perfect and phenomenal. The structure, the build, I'm very, very happy with. For building it as a living space, as a tiny house, I think it needs to be taken one slight level higher. Guess I should explain why I'm removing all the plywood from the inside of this cargo trailer. Well, the reason is simple. Tomorrow, my friend Doug is going to be arriving here from Colorado Springs with my polyiso foam. I purchased this foam insulation board about two and a half months ago down in Florida. Actually, Doug purchased it in Colorado Springs for me, and then I sent him a reimbursement payment from Florida before I left there. So this was done far prior to all of the problems that I had with the Dodge truck, prior to my truck being stolen. This was done back then. So the foam's been paid for. It's sitting down at Doug's, and he's been waiting and waiting for me to show up. So it's already been paid for. I'm not going to be out of pocket for anything else on this install. Doug has offered to pay for the screws, paid for the 3/4 ply subfloor we're putting in here, and donating labor to get this in here, and that's his contribution to help me out in this crisis situation. I'm down to my last few panels, so I'm making progress here, getting everything removed in preparation for tomorrow. I think all I'll have to do tomorrow with Doug's help is to remove the power panel back over here and pull that off. I actually need two people to do that, and I want to do it sort of last minute, and then we'll pull that off and be able to start the insulation inside here. Well, I ran into a roadblock. I'm down to my last two sets of plywood to be removed, and each of these is held on by the corner here by this piece of aluminum. So I need to remove this piece of aluminum to be able to get to the back side of the plywood. But somebody switched the screw heads on me. As you can see here, all of these are Phillip heads everywhere in the plywood, everywhere in the entire build, except for just these last few screws that are going into this piece of aluminum here. And unfortunately, this is a real odd size. It's not 6-pointed star, it's an 8-pointed. So you can see there's 8 edges around it. It's a star type pattern. A while back I purchased a set from Harbor Freight for working on my Dodge truck. It has a very elaborate set of bits here, and there's tons and tons of different sizes, various security sizes, star sizes. All of these are 6-pointed except for these down here, the OM56 and M6, but those are the wrong ones. Those don't fit. These over here, all these star connectors don't fit. So I am stuck until I find the right size to be able to remove those, or I've got to rip them out or find some other solution. Anyway, Steve's truck unfortunately won't start. I've been trying for 2 days to get it to start. It just simply won't start for me. Not sure what's going on there. So I don't have a borrow vehicle that I can actually take and run down to Home Depot or Harbor Freight and try to find the right size bit for this. So I'm going to be stuck until I can get a ride from someone. Hopefully that'll be sometime today. If not, I'll have to wait for Doug to get here tomorrow, and we'll have to go down together unless he happens to have the tools with him. That's all I have for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed seeing what the inside of a Renown Cargo trailer from Rock Solid, what that looks like. And I think, yeah, it's interesting for me, and hopefully tomorrow, crossing my fingers, we'll be able to get the insulation in, at least the subfloor, and a good start on the walls.